Hi, my name is Barbara Bond. I'm the featured artist for the Art for Heaven's Sakes for 2020. Welcome to my studio here in Laguna Beach. My medium for art is glass and metal. And before we finish today, I'd like to show you some pieces that I have and some methods of creating some of the art designs that I have. So before we get too farther into it, I want to thank Art for Heaven's Sakes for giving us this platform to exhibit our art for this particular show. So here we are in the studio, and I've been doing art for 40 years, stained glass. I started out with doors and windows and making things for friends and family, and eventually evolved into doing much more than just that. In 2010, I decided I wanted to do a little bit different style of stained glass, so I tried to evolve, or I did evolve into something a little bit different. I have offered now with glass and metal 3 different types of art. I've got a floor statue, I've got a tabletop sculptures, and I also have art that hangs on the wall like a painting. I decided that I wanted to do something, as I said before, other than windows and doors. So in exhibiting my art this way, I think it gives it a little bit different twist on traditional stained glass with the glass and the metal. And oh yes, I put some found objects in my pieces too. Here's something that I'm working on right now, and here's a piece of metal that I found in my travels throughout the United States, some parts of Canada, and it's it looks like lace, but it's a metal piece that I cut up. And in this design that I'm working on now, I've got 3 pieces that I incorporate in there. Sometimes I've used metal rulers, parts of sieves, things like that, to as found objects in the things that I do. When you look at this floor sculpture that I have right here, you can see that I have some gears up here in 2 different places, and then down on the bottom where the base is, those are gears too from a part of a machine. Over here on my tabletop that I have, these pieces at the bottom where it stands on are from Lexus, a car. And all of them are framed in steel, and you can see that they're supported with steel on the steel base as well. Let me take one of my pieces down and give you a good, here's one right here. So here's a small example of what I do. And what's great about the wall hangings is that it hangs somewhat like a painting, but you want a little bit of light behind it. So what I did was develop a little system where they hang off the wall on these hooks. They're very easy to install. You just literally hang them up on the wall. You've got some light behind them, so it gives you a little bit different perspective than a painting would, because as the light in the room moves across during the day, you see the stained glass a little bit differently than you would, let's say a painting, for example. So now let me show you how I do some of the creations. I start first of all here's a sketch that I'm working on now, and this is how this piece started, with just a little doodle that I was sitting at the bar doing, and did that. And then eventually what you do is you make it into a pattern, which looks similar to this. This has kind of been tortured from what I've been doing, but there you go. And this isn't finished yet. I have much more to do with it. But when you start to do a stained glass, you decide on your pattern. You pick your glass. You can see all the materials that I have here. Glass is pretty expensive, but it's also should be, because it's gorgeous. Here's a piece of glass. This glass right here could be anywhere from $2. If you had a real cheap piece of glass, this one happens to be about $12, and you use parts of it and hope that you can use the rest of it later. But after my pattern, I draw from all the glass that I have, decide on the colors that I want to do, and then of course you have to cut the glass. Most of you have seen a glass cutter. This happens to be a diamond tip glass cutter that cuts a little bit better and more exacting, a little bit easier than you would a window pane of glass. But you're going to cut the glass. And then after cutting the glass, you fit the pieces together with lead. And lead comes in a lot of different sizes and different shapes. This happens to be H lead, which means if you look at it by the side, it's in the form of an H. And what that allows you to do is put a piece of glass on either side of it and fit them together like that. So there you go. That would be your 2 pieces of cut glass. After you've cut all your glass, the next thing you have to do is solder. And this, of course, it's a soldering iron with material to solder them together, some solder that you would solder them together, and there's some flux that you would put on the joints before you soldered them. Now, you'd think that you'd be finished after that, but you're really not. You take some DAF, which is what all of us have in our windows to keep them from leaking when it rains. So you take some DAF that looks like just regular putty, and you're going to push it into all these joints, and before long this looks like a mass of gray, and then you end up cleaning it, and then there you go. That's your piece right there. If you look around at some of the pieces here that I have, this was a fun one that I did because it's multicolored, very random. It was just really fun to do. I've done a couple peace signs. It seems that the peace signs are really popular. They're not my favorite thing to do, but they're a popular thing. So I make them again. They stand off the wall. They're double framed in metal. And then that's what they are. Here's a piece that I have that this is another tabletop, a little bit different than the one I showed you earlier. But you can see the found pieces that are in this. They came from a piece of metal like this, and I cut them and pounded them, and I ended up putting them in here. And this is a gear. I love the base. It's very heavy. It's not going to tip over. And it's surprisingly, the stained glass is very sturdy. So it's not as fragile as you would think it is. I started for Art for Heaven's Sakes. I started working on wings, and this is just my prototype for them. And then I didn't put it in anything other, but this is a start to that. And a dove, I thought that would be great, but they're pretty simple. What I really have gone to are some of the more modern pieces, and that's really the style that I like to create. And people have asked me to do it to match the colors in their house and whatnot. These go very, very well on bureaus in offices, bureaus in somebody's house, desktops, and they've been real popular. So the rest of the glass in here, you can see it's hung very easily. These are some older pieces that I have here, not as modern as the ones you first saw. But I hope it gives you a little insight into what it is that I do, how much I enjoy it. I appreciate you taking a look at it, and I hope if you have any questions or want to inquire, they've got my information, and I'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much for joining me in my studio at Laguna Beach. Bye-bye.